welcome to Caring for New Hampshire, a ministry of Concerned Women for America. I'm Elaine Driscoll, and you're here with us today on a special series we're calling Upfront and Personal. And we have invited presidential candidates to come and join us and have an opportunity to really share who they are and what they believe and why they're running. And we're glad that you're here with us, and this is just such a special opportunity here in New Hampshire. We are just so blessed to have the opportunity to really get to meet these candidates, talk to them, and meet them face to face, ask them lots of questions, and really be a filter for the rest of the nation. So today we have with us presidential candidate Bob Greene, and he's from Lowell, Mass. And welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
So pleased to have you with us today. And I'd like to start out, just give us a little bit of your history, because you happen to be a native New Englander.
That's correct.
Which is pretty fabulous. So share with us a little bit about who you are and what prompted you to become a presidential candidate in 2012.
Okay. I'm originally from Lowell, Mass. I was born there and grew up there. Went to Lowell High School. From there, I went to Lowell Technological Institute, which today we call UMass Lowell. I got a bachelor's degree in physics there, and then I went on to graduate school at the University of Wyoming and got a PhD in physics there. After that, that was a time when there was another big recession going on, and so there weren't many jobs in my field. I had spent, maybe a third of my graduate career in the computer science lab, so I thought to myself, well, why don't I just run out and try to find a job programming, which was fairly easy to do in that day. And I ended up working at CWANH Labs in Lowell, in Tewksbury, actually. And I was one of the original developers of the CWANH word processor. I was with CWANH for quite a while, and then went on to CompuGraphic Corporation, who used to make typesetting systems. They were in Wilmington, Mass. And from there, I went down to Connecticut, and at Gerber Scientific Instruments, I was vice president of engineering. And then after that, I went out west to California and worked for Adobe Systems in both marketing and engineering positions.
So you've got quite a scientific engineer background behind you.
Right.
And that's pretty amazing. So if you can just share a little bit, what has prompted you to take on this presidential campaign trail?
Well, okay, I'm retired, basically. And I was, I've been watching a lot of the political shows and watching the debates. And throughout, and we've had a lot of debates already, going back earlier this year. And I was fundamentally upset that the candidates aren't addressing the energy problem in a serious way. So I decided to focus on energy policy. And by happenstance, through our church, we got involved in an investigation of thorium. Thorium is an element, and uranium is element number 92 in the periodic table. Thorium is number 90. And so we started to study the properties, and we had heard that you could do good things with thorium, and so we learned more about the subject. So as the year went on, we decided that this was an effort within our group that we needed to sort of take a grassroots approach to informing people and teaching people about this opportunity. And so we developed a class on thorium and gave that. And so on my website, you can see one of the products of that. That's about a 100-slide tutorial on the subject.
Okay, and can you give us the website for that?
Oh, yes. It's www.greenforoffice.org. Green has an E on the end of it.
Okay.
Okay. And so, the summer continued, and again, nobody's addressing energy, a comprehensive energy plan. So I said, well, coming from Lowell, I knew how unique New Hampshire was with respect to its elections. So I finally said, somebody's got to speak up. And am I the best potential spokesperson? Probably not. There are probably better. But no one else was doing it. So I threw my hat in the ring.
Great.
Contacted the Secretary of State's office, got all the rules and regulations and conformed to them. And that's how I'm here.
Wow. Tell me a little bit more about thorium. You and I were talking a little bit about this before we started, and pretty fascinating what you were sharing and how thorium could really be an actual replacement for what we currently call nuclear energy, which uses uranium.
It can be a replacement for a lot more than that, believe me. So thorium, as I say, is a fundamental element. It's pretty abundant. It's even in your garden. It is much more abundant in the West, the western part of the country. There's higher concentrations of it there. It's naturally not radioactive, so you don't have to worry about sticking your hands in the dirt in the garden and having an effect from it. To make it radioactive, you have to bombard it with neutrons. Mm-hmm. And then it goes through a couple states and gets to where it's a fissile material. That means it can go through fission. And when it does, it acts like uranium in that sense and releases energy. Right. And it creates fission products too, or what you would call radioactive waste. But one of the unique things about thorium is that naturally 99.99% of thorium is a single isotope, whereas uranium is this whole menu of isotopes. And as a result, the fission products are a confined set of products that are much easier to deal with. The fission products from thorium, about 83% of them have a half-life of about 10 years. And the other 17% have longer half-lives on the order of 350 years. Okay, whereas coming out of the uranium and plutonium processes, you have half-lives on the order of 350,000 years. Mm-hmm. So you're already a factor of 1,000 ahead. Now, I'm not saying that 350 years is a short time, but at least it's a manageable time.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, to interrupt you just a little bit,
sure.
We were also sharing that the United States is getting behind in the energy development, and that other nations are already looking at thorium and making plans to move ahead with it. Can you give us a little more insight on that?
India has active projects right now. They're probably farthest ahead, but they are taking a significantly different approach than we would. And that's because they've sort of been outside of the mainstream in nuclear development. They had to develop their own for a variety of reasons. There are other countries that are looking at it. UK's looking at it. Czech Republic's looking at it. But China is starting to get actively involved, and they have made a statement. They made it last January that they want to own this industry. They want to own all the intellectual property in this industry. Now, this is terrible because here's something we invented, and we can get into that. And, are we going to let somebody else just steal it away? We can be a leader here. We just have to get off our collective couches and get out there and do something. And that's what I was trying to do by running for president, is get off the couch and do something.
Well, congratulations and thank you. Now, help me to understand a little bit more. You were saying that thorium could be so potent in its energy that it could literally replace how we get energy altogether in this nation?
Okay, that was a slight exaggeration, but not much. It's not only the energy, but it's the type of reactor that you have it in. And the sort of reactors that we're talking about building these days could be mass-produced, assembly line type of construction, so that it's conceivable, easily conceivable, that we could generate a reactor a day in this country. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you say, well, that's a huge claim. Well, actually, it's not, because if you look at a project that's maybe equivalent size, Boeing puts out a plane a day, more than a plane a day, out of their Washington plant. So this is doable. It essentially means starting a new industry. That doesn't sound like a bad thing. It sounds like
jobs to me.
Right. Yeah.
Something we could
all use. That's right. We got jobs. We can export this. That doesn't sound so bad, because then we, take care of our balance of payments a lot better. So there's some real potential good advantages to this. Now, as for what you can do with it, okay, if we're heavily dependent on electricity already. if we had electric cars, then we could power them by the thorium energy. If we, they would naturally charge up every night. If you don't like electric cars, we could use that energy to create fuel cells, and you could have fuel cell cars. The byproduct of a fuel cell is water. So we could get away from all the carbon that we're emitting today. We could literally stop putting millions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay, so we could halt global warming and climate change. I don't say reverse it, but we could halt it. So tremendous potential here.
Tremendous, okay.
Yeah. And not only that, if we're putting out so many of these reactors, they could be in different sizes, they could be shippable, but you could make much larger ones if you wanted, like to replace a major facility, let's say in New York City. You could do that as well. So the essence of that is there's a potential here to change every fossil fuel plant in the world.
And do you have expectations on how long that would take to do something like that?
Yes. Some people have done calculations on the assumption that it takes 5 years to get through the design and building prototype and some testing, and then 5 years to get something into manufacturing. We're looking at 10 years out before you'd start to see them rolling off an assembly line. And then the estimate is that if you built a reactor a day for 50 years, you could replace every single fossil fuel plant in the world.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
if you so desired.
If you so desired, right.
There's forces against that, of course, but
so that's really what you're all about, is seeing this issue come to the forefront, so that American people can be more aware that there are other alternatives.
Right.
Now, that we could look at.
If you're not importing huge amounts of oil anymore, you can stop having oil wars.
That's true.
Okay, wouldn't that be a nice thing? So as I say, the opportunities here are immense. There's health benefits. We're not putting all that CO2 in the environment. So pulmonary conditions and diseases potentially would take a drop. So that has a positive influence on your health bill. As I like to call it, sort of the Internet of Energy, because it's a game changer. It changes almost every facet of our lives.
Well, it sounds like we just need to get you into the Department of Energy.
Well, okay. Actually, if we can go off on that tangent, the Department, this actually started in the Department of Energy. Back in the 60s, we had a thorium reactor. Okay, it was built by a gentleman named Alvin Weinberg. So he's the father of this molten salt reactor. Well, this turns out he was also the father of the light water reactor. Okay, so this was his second time through, and usually on the second time you say, oh, I can do it a lot better than I did it before. And so he built these reactors with safety as paramount. And so then he tried to sell it to the Atomic Energy Commission and and the Senate committees and so forth. And maybe his timing was bad, maybe personalities were bad, who can say? But they essentially said, well, if you're so concerned about safety, you can just take a walk. And so they essentially handed him his walking papers. And so the project that he had going, which, by the way, had run for 4 years, and what they used to do was they used to shut the reactor off at night and then turn it on again in the morning. Okay, just try doing that with almost any other power plant. So the project was killed, and we went away from it. And then in the background, the other issue was that the military wanted uranium plants so they could get plutonium as a byproduct. Well, guess what? They had already determined that the thorium process was not so good for generating plutonium, and therefore it wasn't particularly good for bombs. So that's one of the downsides of this, is you can't make very good bombs out of thorium.
Okay. Yep. Well, I can't testify to that one way or the other because I am not a PhD in physicist, but I have to take your word on that one.
Okay, so what should have happened at the end of the Cold War? Somebody should have, put their hand up and said, okay, how should we really be generating energy? And that didn't happen, and now we're some 20 years later, and our need is becoming dire, and we really got to get rolling on this. And every day we delay, it just means we're putting off some of those good benefits I mentioned.
Well, I know that energy has definitely been a topic for the current administration,
Right.
and they've worked to try to, support wind power and other types of energy, but they just haven't quite been able to be marketable and usable by the everyday person.
Well, I love solar power. I love wind power. Our church has solar collectors on the roof, for example. But the fact of the matter is, if you do the calculations, you can just not create enough of it. There's not enough places that are where you can use it. There's the investment costs to get the amount that you want.
You're talking
are
about
huge.
solar
or wind.
Yes.
There's transmission issues about how you get,
And storage.
And we don't have really storage techniques for any of this. So there's reasons why there are barriers for this to be a solution. Now, let's say you had an energy source that dried up. Okay, such as oil may. I mean, yes, we've got a huge, new field in North Dakota, but that eventually that's going to dry up too. So let's say you had a source that dried up. With the alternative energies available today, you could not replace that single source.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what we're seeing now.
Right. And okay, it's projected that by 2050, the world's energy usage will at least triple. Okay. So we're
each going to have 5 laptops apiece, right?
Right. So it could be.
And then you'll have your PDA and your phone and your all at once in one
and
place.
plugged into your ears.
Yes.
Anyway, let's say, we don't have, none of these alternative sources can do as much as we need or as fast as we need it, just to replace one of our existing sources today. And we're relying on, coal, gas, oil, hydro. So we can't even generate enough. And to do 3 times of this by 2050, the natural result was, the conclusion they came to, we've got to do all of these and a lot more of what we're doing. So there's this acceleration in, let's say, hydrofracking to get gas out of the ground. And that's having great success, even though it's creating all sorts of environmental problems. But we're getting a lot of natural gas out that is then driving new gas-fired fuel plants. That's a win in some ways because it's domestically sourced, okay, and it is cleaner burning. Okay, but they gave exceptions to the industry so that they don't have to follow the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And in some parts of the country, this is wreaking great havoc.
But again, you're saying that we're looking at a source that eventually will no longer be available to us, and we're right back to square one again.
With all of them, right. Whereas with thorium, we easily have enough thorium for 1,000 years for the world's supply. It's, as I say, it's ubiquitous. The U.S. has between 15 and 19% when they did their first survey, and they haven't really gone beyond that. They haven't really looked hard for it. You can find it in a lot of places. This is low-hanging fruit right now. The government in the 60s, extracted a lot of thorium. They decided not to use it for their project, so they buried 3,200 metric tons in the desert in Nevada. So we've also got a starter supply already.
I see.
Okay, and that would last the U.S. on a ramped-up project about 10 years. So we've got enough to get going. Now, where else can you find thorium? You can find it in uranium tailings. So we can mine the parts that have already been mined, so we don't even have to start new mines. I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that if you went through the coal ash pits, you would also find it, and you could mine the coal ash pits. Okay, we haven't talked about radioactive waste. This has radioactive waste. I don't want to kid you, and I mentioned that before, but one of the things that we can do is we can take our existing radioactive waste and use it in a molten salt reactor, such as this, and essentially consume our existing radioactive supplies.
Now,
and we're talking millions of tons here.
Now, did you say, correct me if I'm wrong, but France is doing something similar to that?
France does something like that. They have what they call reprocessing. And the Argonne National Labs did a report for House Committee back in November, and they essentially recommended in their draft report the French process. And that report I thought was a travesty, but because they didn't look at the thorium cycle at all, even though they had a favorable report on molten salt reactors from one of their own labs, from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So I really feel that there has to be a serious energy discussion about policy. And by the way, if you ever hear an energy policy discussion that doesn't mention thorium, you're not hearing a serious debate.
Well, exactly. I mean, if China is looking at wanting to buy the whole bag and then put us in a position where we have to buy from them, I think we already buy plenty from them already. But
well, in China's case, we have to take that seriously because they've already done something similar. It was back about 7 years ago, we took what are called the rare earth metals off the strategic metals list. Okay, and what that meant was that we were no longer going to refine those metals ourselves and buy those metals as a nation. We're going to a free market solution. Well, what happened in the free market was that China went out and bought all the refiners, or through competitive, pricing practices, they essentially drove other refiners out of the market. So China has a corner on the rare earth metals today.
I see.
Okay. Now, and they don't even have enough to meet their own needs. And these rare earth metals go into all the sophisticated devices, from stealth technology to satellites to computers.
How do we allow this to happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's happened. And one of the things that if this government were smart, the very first thing it would do would be to put those rare earth metals back on the strategic metals list and start up refining again. We have the supplies, the domestic supply, but we just have to get, we're making it.
Well, I'm really glad you're here to bring these out because this is stuff that, everyday Americans, we don't hear about this.
I believe
kind
that.
of thing.
And that's why I got out here was to bring the news, even though it's bad news in some ways. Yeah.
Well, you can only deal with bad news until you hear it, right?
Right, yeah.
So,
but we have to get going on a real energy policy, and we're not.
And definitely energy spins out into many of the other issues that we're facing as a nation right now.
Right.
And the fact that we're trying to protect interests in so many other countries.
Right.
Where if we were able to be independent in our energy production and use, that we wouldn't be so compelled to be involved in these other situations.
Exactly, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Good point. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Actually, from your Concerned Women's Group perspective, there is another angle on this. There are some correlations, empirical correlations of the data that are of interest. And that is that countries of over 10 million people who have a high energy usage also have fewer children per woman, significantly fewer. And there's a correlation here such that if we provided third world countries with more power, there's a reasonable chance that this would have a tendency to drive down global population.
Huh.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. That's not a, the data is such that it's not causal, but it's certainly suggestive that that would happen.
It's suggestive. Is that because the women become more educated and they're working outside of the home? And
it's partly that, but it brings other things. So I think we should have a State Department policy where these struggling countries, we would deliver a thorium power plant, okay, with a sewage treatment plant, okay, with a nitrogen fertilizer plant, with a desalination plant, and essentially give them a starter kit for a decent society. And I think that would make a difference. They would have good water,
it
be
does
able to
make
plant.
a difference. It does make a difference.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I want to see the world population decline.
Well, it's
but
not
it would be nice to see that those who want to perform abortions, that would decline. So, in that sense, we can agree.
Right. No, I think this would be natural forces. That it would be the economic forces that would allow people to alter their lives, and probably in directions that most women would agree with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, one last thing that you'd like to share with the viewers?
I think people are going to say we can't afford to do this. Okay, and I would say incorrect. It turns out that every kilowatt hour that you spend on electricity, money goes into a fund. So the nuclear companies have been socking away money for years and years. Currently, there's $25 billion, sitting on the sides and what it's for is disposable of nuclear waste.
Okay.
Set aside for that purpose. And here we have a technology that can help them dramatically reduce their nuclear waste. Okay,
wow.
So in theory, that money should be made available for projects like this.
Well, do you have further plans on how you're going to get this information out?
I'm here in New Hampshire to try to get the candidates to say the word thorium and to learn how to spell it, and to get the media to do that as well. So if any of your viewers can help me in that regard, please, I'd love that.
Well, Mr. Greene, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It's great to hear that there are other alternatives out there that we can be looking at, and we wish you great success.
Okay, and so once again, if I may, just plug my website.
Yes.
www.greeneforoffice.org, and Greene has an E on the end. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
And we want to thank you for joining us, and look to join us again as we have more of the, as they call themselves, the lesser known candidates. But as you can see, there's a lot out there, and they have a lot of good information for us. And we hope that you'll join us again on Caring for New Hampshire.